All right. Hey everyone. Welcome to another deep dive. This time we have a round two this time with API3. Welcome back, Ugur.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe you can just like lay the landscape for us. So like like what sort of has changed for API3 over the past year, like the brief overcap, and then I mean probably the more interesting question is like what do you think has changed in the space over the last year? You know?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I essentially go over price feeds if that matters, since that is the thing that everyone wants to talk about when it comes to oracles. So we probably dive into how our price feeds work,
Okay.
just so everyone has an understanding. And then I think one of the major pivots we did since last time was that we concentrated on OEV and how we can essentially take that value and redirect it back to dApps and increase data feed granularity while doing so. Yeah, and I'm happy to give my my thoughts on the space. Yeah, later
Okay.
on after that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like probably last year, last time we had spoke, you guys were still relatively focused on price feeds. Um,
Yeah.
and it sort of has played out that way that sort of continued. Did anything sort of surprise you guys over the past year? Just kind of
Um,
the depths of the bear market, if you will.
not really. Like, I mean, I think we were pretty focused in our own bubble. I think like happy developments that we saw where a lot of people were already ideating about it was also like the pull model. Like we will go over it in the OEV model, but like essentially it is quite similar. We've seen a lot of dApps integrate that, and it is just a little bit of reaffirmation. I guess like how other people designed it is a bit different than how we envisioned it, but we can go over that in the presentation.
Sure. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, let's get in. We'll draw some price feeds and just kind of um,
Yeah.
go into it. So, all right. Well, we'll do. I mean, okay. So, we'll be a smart contract over here
Yeah.
on mainnet. We'll be
On whatever chain
on what
there is.
are you guys chain agnostic completely now?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean it's EVM basically. We can
Okay.
deploy on any EVM chain without any issues. It's the same thing that is being done across every chain.
Okay. So is this well, so do you guys have a smart contract there and then um
That smart contract essentially acts, let's call it like a database. There is a certain hash that represents essentially a data feed, which can be by a singular oracle or by multiple. And that ID essentially is attached to a value, and that specific value can be updated. I guess I have to like talk a little bit about the Oracle setup to explain better what that means. I guess like one differentiation or like what API3 believes in, and like I guess we first have to start on that front. Like every Oracle project kind of has a different approach to how they want to bring data on chain, and our belief or our core belief that guides all of the design choices is that we believe the data gathering happens somewhere. Somewhere owns that data, someone owns that data, and it is kind of up to those entities what happens with that data. Because if we are quite frank, if somebody like CoinGecko or the exchanges themselves decided to pull the plug on all Oracle projects, they could. Which is why our design choice essentially is whatever we build has to be built for these data providers, because at the end of the day, they are the people that you have to trust anyway. Like that trust assumption can't be removed. You trust them intrinsically already. So whatever we build has to be built with them in mind. Like that is essentially the philosophy for API3. And I guess this is debatable. Every Oracle project has a different approach to that, but that is what we decided to go with since a lot of these companies essentially specialize either in data gathering or are the exchanges themselves, and so on and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have over here like CoinGecko, Coinbase, and Binance, right? Those are
for instance.
three big data providers. And so you would come over in your EVM chain and you would say like, listen, I want the median of these three. Would that be how you would specify it? Or
so each of these runs an oracle directly, what we term essentially a first-party oracle. So you get data directly from CoinGecko, directly from Coinbase, directly from Binance, instead of through middleman, however you want to define it. If it's a layer of decentralized middleman, if it's a single middleman, what we do is essentially these providers run Oracle nodes directly, and you essentially call an API on-chain, so to speak, without anyone being in between.
so it would be these three guys would basically, they have a key, a private key that, or a public address that you know here, and they sign their price feeds.
Exactly. And there's like two methods how we update, like their oracles have gateways where you can essentially collect signed data from. For instance, we have two update mechanisms. As a primary method, we as api3 update the price feeds for which we get signed data from these providers. We can't tamper with that data. They sign it with their private key, and we can essentially push that then on-chain, and I'll go into what that means. And if we don't do it according to certain parameters, they essentially do it themselves as a fallback. And how the on-chain, what happens on the contract level is essentially they have their own address, which is their Oracle address, let's just call it. And that specific address is called with certain parameters, let's say BTC USD. And when you hash those two together, you get what we call a beacon ID. So for instance, Coinbase BTC USD has a very specific ID, and that can't be changed. That specific ID can only be updated by calling the Coinbase Oracle with the parameters BTC USD.
Yep.
So that value is essentially, let's say, immutable. If you would read that specific ID, nobody can essentially feed you anything differently. It is always coming from Coinbase with that specific parameter. Obviously, and then how we would build an aggregated feed is essentially mashing multiple of these beacon IDs together and build what we call a beacon set ID. So again, it would be CoinGecko BTC USD, Binance BTC USD, Coinbase BTC USD, and if you mash all of those three together, hash them together, you end up with an ID that again can only be updated by the underlying beacons. You can't essentially update it with anything else other than what is defined there.
Okay, so they would have the beacon set here, and then that would be how you sort of push it on. And then for people watching, like these aren't just APIs. These are, it's not like you're just reading an API value. These are directly signed from the exchanges or from CoinGecko. So, so like if they break their API or upgrade it, you're not out of luck.
Yeah. Like their Oracle config can essentially, like that's the thing, when they do change anything on the API level, that the config has to be rebuilt, because like if they do anything to change it, you won't just, like, they can't fake it, because what happens is like the Oracle address is always the same, that doesn't change, but once they change the API config, essentially the second part of the hash changes, which means that they can't change things and suddenly feed you new things. It is, like, quite literally, so to speak, impossible. But one core issue here remains. Obviously, all of this is immutable. You can't do anything, but oracles are not static. You need to be able to change things. And this is where our consumers don't read beacons or beacon sets. They read what we call a DAPI. And a DAPI is essentially just a mapping. So similar to how an ENS name is pointing to your ETH address, we can point a name to a specific ID. So if you on this contract read the API, let's say ETH USD, that will be pointed somewhere.
So, and then this would go to, like, say, BTC USD, and then this would be you would
But
this would
that,
be controlled by
that is currently controlled by a multisig
Yep.
openly by API3, and it is currently a 5 out of 8. We have to set that. I'll go later into what our plans are with that multisig, because obviously that's not an acceptable thing forever. Essentially, what we can do is consumers read ETHUSD. We are in touch with all of these providers and ourselves are monitoring all of these values. And if one beacon set acts up because one of the beacons is doing some shady stuff, we can essentially just build a new one, kick the one out that is acting up, and point then the name to the new creation. The base contract itself on the right side is immutable. So what this multisig can do can never change. The only thing that it can do is essentially point this name somewhere. And that
I mean, you could, like, theoretically, not that the users would want this, but like, could like their governance contract could be manage the DAPI as well, right? Like if they wanted to.
They could. I mean, the contract itself is owned by the multisig, so they can set names themselves. So we set names. But you already mentioned a good point with like governance. One of the core issues with this approach is that we can theoretically point that name anywhere. Like we can point BTC USD to a creation of ETHUSD, and you would automatically suddenly, instead of reading BTC, read ETH, which is obviously a huge issue. One of the ways how we're going to tackle that in the future, and I'll go into why that isn't happening now, we launched these aggregated feeds, these beacon sets, essentially quite recently in August. So we can now offer directly first-party operated, verifiable, transparent data feeds that are then managed by API3. And one of the core things that we want to change in the future is the providers that are running these Oracle nodes are known. The data sets that they are providing are known. So essentially, since API3 is also a DAO, we can on a DAO level already push a Merkle tree with where you can point it, what is allowed. So we can, in theory, drastically reduce where this multisig is able to push things. So if we say we have 10 crypto providers, and let's say the minimum feeds that we want to build are 7 providers at least, we can push a Merkle tree with all combinations. And then what the multisig can do is point towards a whitelisted set of addresses, which drastically reduces the amount of damage that you can do. It doesn't remove it entirely, because there's still scenarios where this multisig obviously can do some damage within that constellation, but we can't, let's say, point it to coin market cap and they suddenly report trillions and exploit the entire construction that way.
Right. Yeah. No, super cool. And then, I mean, how do you had mentioned like whitelisted data providers. How do you add these guys over here or remove them? Is that the multi-sig as well?
How they operate, essentially, we are partnered with them. We test them throughout multiple months and all the pairs that they have. For each pair, we select the best amount of providers. Like not every crypto provider is included for every pair. They're constantly measured against each other. And then where we point, essentially, a specific DAPI is determined by that. It could be that Coinbase, Binance, CoinGecko, whatever, are the best for BTC, but it might be that Kraken, whatever, so on, are best for ETH. And essentially, on each DAPI, this decision is then made. And how we do it with providers is I think we are in touch with most of them, and then we are in commercial agreements with them, and they run their own nodes, and they get compensated for it, and they have to pass our tests, essentially, also on a continuous basis. Like if we realize that throughout numerous weeks the quality drops drastically, we will have to drop them, because we have a service quality to uphold, right, essentially.
Well, I mean, like, so if you wanted to be a new person, you would basically, you would come contact you guys.
Yeah, right? You'd have to come contact us.
Okay, it's not like come stake a bunch of money or something like that.
Yeah, no, No, it is essentially whitelisted through,
Yep.
let's say, the people that are in charge, which might change depending on who passes DAO proposals, yada, yada, yada.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So then. So
I
with the
guess,
so with the Merkle tree though, this is basically like you would the way that you upload it now is you don't just individually do prices, you aggregate all of these off chain into a Merkle root
no,
or
no,
no.
actually not. Each of them is pushing their individual price on chain, and then we
Okay.
aggregate directly on chain.
Oh wow. Okay. And then you would make like some Merkle root out of it once it's on chain, and then this could be fed directly into the user contract if you would want. And then they could.
It's actually like the user doesn't see that, so literally just reading. They're literally just reading the API name. So they're reading BTC USD, and what happens on the contract is, let's say we have a BTC USD feed for 7 providers. That is a beacon set, so a set of beacons. So what happens is that each of these providers is pushing an answer on chain, so updating their individual beacons. And then you aggregate the beacon set, which is then the median value out of those 7. And the name itself, the DAPI, is pointed to the aggregation. So they read the aggregated median updated value of all of those providers for that specific asset.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
No, that makes
People will probably be like, why don't you do this off chain? I guess like one of the reasons is that it also has security implications, and our design choice, like I mentioned, is that we do this with in a first party way, directly with the API providers. For instance, if you would do this with something like a third party network like Chainlink, where you have 31 nodes and all of them pushing their answer, is obviously something that is economically absolutely unviable. But since we can drastically reduce the amount of actual data sources needed, because even in a setup where there are 30, 40 nodes used in the middle layer, there's not 30 or 40 APIs behind there. There's like, if you're lucky, 5 to 10. So by going to them directly, we're already cutting out like 80% of the required, let's say, signatures on chain, which makes it feasible. I think per like gas consumption currently, and we haven't even looked at the optimization quite that much yet, is around 150K, 160K per update. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, so this would be like, the traditional pull Oracle design, I would say, would be like these guys sign prices and then you pull them directly into the user contract, right?
Yeah.
Parse, but then you guys do it slightly different in that you pull it into the database first and then it reads it.
Yeah, like the user reads it from a data. It's basically a push Oracle design. Like it is maintained according to deviation and heartbeat, and maintained in that contract, and then the user reads it directly from the contract through the name.
Well, they could push it sooner than the heartbeat, right? Like I think anyone's allowed, or no?
No, that is where we get into OEV, but
Oh,
no, they can't. The signed data is gate capped. The endpoints are not public.
Okay.
Might change in the future, might not, but they are currently like the only people that are able to get signed data is essentially api3 and the providers amongst each other.
Well, right, because if you made them public, then I guess everybody could just, go around the contract and not pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like theoretically, we also don't charge. I can get into that later. Maybe like the only thing we do charge. I mean, yeah, the only thing we do charge is gas costs for maintaining these. Our monetization scheme is OEV. That I'll, I guess, go into later. So when we go to approach chains and so on, and they're asking like, how much money do you make with this? Like theoretically, nothing. We calculate kind of the volatility of each asset, the volatility of each chain, and guesstimate how much the consumption will be. And we offer chains the ability to buy subscriptions or like DApps subscriptions for a period of time for a specific asset. And our backend recalculates every month or so what the current prices are. So you can always go, I'm not sure if we can show it here, but we have a marketplace that is acting similar to a DApp. You just go there, you pay in the native currency of your network that you're on, and everything else is handled by us. Like it's similar to a subscription essentially.
So like, would that be in the DAPI contract? Or
it doesn't do it automatically. Like essentially, that is a service that is ran by us. The payment itself is made on chain. You pay to a contract that essentially takes payment. It only accepts the exact amount that is defined by us, so you can't over or underpay. And once that payment is received, we essentially, what happens is that we point this DAPI name somewhere, use the funds that you paid us to maintain the operation, like the overhead of gas.
Cool. What you mean you guys don't want to go post your giant revenue numbers online and show how much you're extracting from users? I wouldn't.
I mean, the base data feed we don't make any money with, and our orders are public also. Like when you go to the market, there's an orders tab, and it shows how much was paid for a certain amount of data feeds. And yeah, like it is pretty public what we charge, and also our consumption is public on chain. Like you can quite easily see how much somebody paid us and see how much we paid for the maintenance of a certain data feed on chain.
Right.
I mean, it's a public ledger. We can't hide it.
Yeah. Okay. And now, right before we kind of get into OEV, wanted to see, do you guys, I know some price feed providers talk about like sort of more transformations or trying to find like a true price of a given asset. Like, do you guys do any of that? Like, what are the pros and cons of doing that?
Not really. Let's just put it like that. We kind of benchmark throughout the process of like we have kind of our own benchmarking of what is the current price, and the providers that are using that, we benchmark against that and see if they're performing within a certain variance. So we're essentially just looking how does the API compare to what should theoretically be the market price, and let's put it like this, we're never in the business of like data creation. We merely make it possible for you to consume select API providers for specific assets that we deem they perform good under. That would be a good definition, I guess.
So you're not going after liquid assets, basically. You're only interested in like the big guys more so.
It depends. Yeah, like I think one issue, or like one thing that we categorically currently still said no to, is like stuff that only trades on a single exchange, things that just have a Uniswap pool and nothing else, because we essentially don't deem that safe enough. What ends up on our market is something that we are comfortable with providing you with, where we don't expect anything to go categorically wrong. So yeah, that is, I guess, a good summary. So you can't get everything with us. We are getting very strange requests sometimes that we just can't fulfill, or sometimes it's literally just a Uniswap pool, and then I'm wondering why you don't just read that value on chain and deal it with yourself somehow. But they're like, we can't process certain things.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people are using right now the steth price, and it's like,
yeah,
it trades like almost all of it on Curve. And
oh yeah, that we can still do. Like what we can do there is, it depends. Essentially, what we can offer depends on our providers. Some of them are sophisticated enough to do a lot of DEX pricing, which is how we can then do it. And some of them are essentially not. They only do centralized exchanges, and then they can't offer that. But we have a variety of them that do. Like when I think of decentralized assets like Go, Curve USD, staked ETH, like all of these things that are mainly trading on chain. And then obviously there's the part of like LSDs where you have to bridge the mainnet exchange rate, which is another complete different thing. It doesn't even it's not even a market. It's kind of just bridging a contract value over somewhere that you then combine with an ETH fee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the
complicated.
market's different, you know? It's like
Yeah,
like there could theoretically be a split in, you know, the pricing. Which is yeah, it's an attack vector waiting to happen, I'm sure.
yeah. Essentially, that is also one of the reasons why on the things that only trade on DEXs, we currently are in the process of testing that out with a lot of our providers. They need to cover a lot of markets, and the amount of assets we're going to offer is going to be limited to things that are highly liquid, like essentially stuff like staked ETH. Frax, I think, is a good example that is not on a lot of exchanges, but has good liquidity across numerous chains.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah, shall we get into OEV stuff now?
Sure.
Cool. I'll erase. I mean, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I'm just
Okay.
wondering. No.
Get a good idea. Okay, so we'll keep our user contract up here. And OEV, I don't even think we've said it, but this is Oracle extractable value for you listeners who are rather confused probably at the moment. So the base would be like this would be like a user contract, and then we'll put like the api3 price contract over here, Oracle.
Yeah. You'd have to put something in between. Like users, when they use us, typically don't read the contract directly, they read a proxy. And that is specifically important for OEV, because for OEV itself, they will need to deploy their own proxy. And I'll get into why that
Yeah,
is.
very confused. Okay, so but to explain OEV, there would be like, let's say, you know, we'll write like the current price is 100. So like T price, T1. Okay, so if the current price is 100, and then if it's going to drop down to 50, there's going to be a really large liquidation event. So
Yeah.
somebody gets to make, you know, somebody's going to make $100,000 off of this liquidation event. The problem is that what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Whoever updates this Oracle contract can then, in that exact same transaction, call liquidate, and they win this whole thing. So whoever manages this Oracle contract basically gets that $100,000 reward, and that's, some people would say, a problem.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the only reason it doesn't happen currently is because people like, I mean, we can quite openly say that Chainlink decided not to do it, but theoretically nothing stops Chainlink from updating to bag all of the liquidations themselves. Like one of the core issues is why OEV exists in the first place, or how it happens, is that there's most of the times price is maintained in a push fashion on a chain according to some deviation, let's say 1%. But sometimes there are certain liquidations that are possible theoretically off-chain, but that price is not reflected on-chain yet. Like, for instance, let's say ETH price is $1,000. At 1% deviation, the data feed, the next update would be 1010 or 990. But there's a big, like you said, juicy liquidation at 995. The issue is that the Oracle itself will not update before 990. So in theory, the price could dip to 991, not cause an Oracle update, and then go up again. This user should have been liquidated. This juicy reward essentially should have been paid out to whoever wanted to liquidate them. But the update on chain did not happen because it was not within that 1%, specified 1% deviation. And that is essentially what we want to tackle with what we call OEV share. OEV share is essentially, we maintain on the Oracle contract, like we showed in the previous example, these data feeds. Let's call BTC USD according to 1% deviation with these first-party oracles, with these 7 nodes. But additionally, there is going to be a relay that collects all of this signed data and makes it available to anyone that
Is that the
pays for
proxy?
it. No, like you can essentially, if you draw on the right side, let's say 3 Oracle nodes, call it again Coinbase.
Oh, over here. So
Yeah, essentially
Coinbase.
Coinbase, CoinGecko, Binance.
Yep.
So they maintain together with us on the main Oracle contract, let's say BTC USD at 1% deviation.
Okay. Okay. And then
there's this is a centralized relay. We essentially you can draw that below, collect all of the signed data. Yeah, it's called OEV relay, or that's what we termed it. This relay collects all of the signed data from CoinGecko, Binance, and Coinbase. So all of their answers are also reported directly to that relay.
Okay, so this is like the Polar Oracle model right here.
Exactly. And now we don't allow anyone to get that data. You essentially have to bid for it. You have to win an auction. Let's say, again, in that example where the price dropped to 995, instead of waiting for the base feed to update, because it won't, you could at 995 just go to the relay, win an auction, and now you get access to all of the signatures you need to update the price on chain. And we don't allow you to update the base feed. What you do is you update the proxy of a specific DAP. And that proxy is essentially preferring the more recent value, obviously. And yeah, exactly. Like for instance, if Aave would read over their proxy, they would continuously read the base feed, but somebody could come in and update BTC USD specifically for Aave. And the bid that they pay, they also have to pay to that proxy while updating it. Like the proxy won't accept an update unless, for instance, let's say, like we said, there's 100,000 up for grabs. Somebody said, I'm fine with 10K, I'm going to bid 90K. And then while updating the proxy, they have to pay the proxy $90,000 in the native currency of the chain. So now Aave can essentially withdraw that money and do whatever they want with it.
So is this OEV relay, or is this a contract? Is the auction contract, like, where is that?
That is in our backend, like essentially.
So like how would, like let's say there's some MEV guy out there and he's like,
yeah,
okay, so there's $100,000 at stake if I can run this price push at 995, right?
Yeah.
Where do I go? Do I submit something on chain? Do I?
So essentially, there's 2 parts of it. Searchers can participate in this by depositing USDC collateral into a specific contract. That contract essentially makes sure that they have sufficient amounts of money for what they bid on. And then our backend essentially is continuously running auctions. That is what the OEV relay does. So somebody like the searcher can come in and they can essentially preemptively already make bids. They know the liquidation price, so they bid at 995. So whenever the relay hits that number, it's essentially going to check who has the highest amount of bids at this spot and award that.
So what it would be is like, so like it would have like a price, and then it would say like, 995, 994, 900, or even like 1,000, and then these guys would just place bids at these specific prices.
Yeah.
So then, he would do bid, 99K or something like that, and then this is just continuously. So you could have a bunch of open bids all at once.
Yes, but once a bid is won, there is gonna be like a slight period of like delay to give the searcher the chance to essentially liquidate it. So once somebody won on a specific feed for a specific project, there is essentially a certain window they have to liquidate the position. If not, the auction continues, and they essentially also get slashed on the USDC that they put into the contract because they haven't executed on their bid.
Right. So you would bid 99K and then let's
then
say
you have then you essentially have that window to update the proxy, transfer the 99K to the project, and update it, and with that update bag whatever liquidations you want.
Yep. And then so like is this usually like almost like intra block the bids happen? Like it would be like,
I mean,
like how long
in
does a
alpha.
bid stay open? Is it usually only like, you open a bid?
That's up to you. You can leave it open however long you want. You can cancel it. There's essentially an endpoint that they can use that lists all of their bids, all of their open bids,
Yep.
all of the bids that were successful. Like it's essentially just, let's call it an order book that they have. But once your order is hit, you kind of like need to execute on it, because otherwise you get essentially slashed on the other end on your USDC. Like we essentially currently require collateral. We at some point want to slowly push that into a reputation model. So essentially, the more honest you act and the more often you actually execute on your things, your capital requirements will be lowered, so that like the only reason we gotta have a USDC slash is to prevent somebody coming in and just winning bids all over but never executing on them. Which like one scenario could be you're a searcher yourself, you have a big arbor position, and you just prevent your own liquidation by constantly making bids and not executing on them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like you could only prevent it if you knew like that the price was going to come back up, because like the base feed's still going to update at some point.
Exactly, the main feed is going to update at some point, but like this is very edge case scenarios that we're talking about. But essentially, let's put it like the DAP is getting promised money, and we kind of have to make sure that that in one way or another happens, because otherwise people can just come in and make the auction a living hell for anyone else. Like there has to be some financial disincentive, so you just otherwise you essentially can just DDoS the service without ever executing on your one bids.
Well, because like once you get, so the bid was 99K, you guys give some back to the user? Or
essentially,
like where does it go?
What happens is that like let's take ETH mainnet. The user actually bids the user bids a certain amount, and how should I phrase this? We charge the searcher 110% in effect. 100% is in the native currency on the chain where it is at, and they need to pay that to the proxy. So the user essentially gets quote unquote 100%, and 10% we subtract from their USDC balance on mainnet as our fee, which effectively will lead to lower bids. Like I just want to be open here. This doesn't mean that like in practice,
right now you would just bid,
a little bit less because we're charging you 110. So it will, in theory, it should come to similar numbers than Flashbots and MEV Share is doing, like the 90-10 model.
Yeah.
Like practice. I don't want to call it 90-10 because it's not, like we're just charging the searcher 110.
110 model. Cool. But then so 100%. So nothing goes back to the user contract, right?
Everything, like the 100% go back to the user.
Oh, okay. So this goes back to the user contract. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we essentially whatever the searcher charges or bids, the whole amount goes to the user, and 10% get charged in addition from us in USDC from their mainnet balance. So we charge the searcher, not the user. Whatever the searcher bids goes to the user.
Nice. And I mean, like, let's say, potentially. So let's say you bid 995 and you win it.
Yeah.
And somebody else bids 994.
Yeah.
Is it like a race condition? Like you better push really fast, or else, like let's say the price, it's just free falling. So like the 995 hits, then the 994 hits. Is it like a race?
essentially, what happens is that you always have the auction one delay parameter that we have. It's currently, I think, at 15 seconds. So you get your 15 seconds to execute on stuff.
So
But
you
if you
get 15
don't,
seconds, then 994 guy gets 15 seconds. Then like it could theoretically like take a long time to get down to the bottom guy.
essentially still in alpha. I'm not sure how it plays
Okay.
out because I'm also not developing it. I'm just essentially, I can give you the rundown here. Like we give people the ability to execute on them, but if they don't, they get essentially like the 10% that we mentioned on the right side. That gets taken no matter what. Like even if they don't update, we still gonna take 10% and slash them of that amount essentially. So as to prevent them continuously bidding.
Yeah. No, cool. I mean, okay. Other things I guess would be like, is there sort of a, I don't know how I would say it, but like a disincentive for you guys to push to this feed? Like, doesn't it create a bad scenario? Because like now, like you would probably like, you guys don't make any money off of this, but you make a whole bunch of money off the OEV stuff. Like, wouldn't you just
Yeah.
like want to put Bitcoin heartbeat of 2 hours and 10% deviation, or like could that
Yeah,
be pushing?
like essentially that all of that is still being theorized how we're going to handle it. Currently we offer like deviations down to 0.25, but one of the ways how to I mean, there's currently two bigger debates that I'm also having. Like, one of the things is we just accept that a lot of these larger feeds, they are just being they are being offered more granularly, and my English today. And you can't. People will want them essentially as low as possible, and you can't force 1% there, even if there's going to be liquidations and whatnot. People typically want the lower number, but where it happens that you can't simply offer very low deviation feeds is like a lot of the long tail assets. They are just not very doable. So OEV becomes pretty nice there because you can offer people more granularity than is typically available on the market while not paying it for it yourself. So
Right.
it's still things that are being debated currently and being tested. But yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. Us being very granular on the Oracle, on the base layer, is going to make available OEV smaller.
Well, you should just have like a
Naturally.
little, you should just have an auction for like the heartbeat price threshold auction. And then like you don't actually ever have to push it, but like once it hits the price threshold or whatever, if nobody's bid on it, you just open up the API to everyone. Whoever wants it can push it for free. And then like then you guys save gas.
Yeah, I guess we could do that. The only reason why we don't, or like why we designed it in a way where you can't update the base feed yourself, is that it makes it pretty hard to determine if there was OEV somewhere else. Like if you're bidding for the BTC USD feed that is used by Aave, you 100% know where the OEV was generated and
Right.
whom it was generated by, so you can attribute the entire money there. Like people could, for instance, in theory, like still, let's say that you have no OEV, but you love the fact that the Aave proxy is more granular than anything else. You could write off the Aave feed and enjoy
Yeah.
the granularity. But in theory, if you have any OEV, people will bid to the proxy of Aave, and Aave nets all of your OEV. So like you're kind of incentivized to deploy your own proxy if you make any amount of potential OEV, because otherwise you're just handing that potential money to the project that you're reading it from. I guess it's a
Yep.
yeah, you have to decide what is more important to you. Like, do you want to back some OEV if there is some OEV on your DApp, or do you value the increased granularity more from, let's say, larger DApps that have more updates occurring due to larger amounts of liquidations?
For sure. Um yeah, no, this is super cool. Um yeah, I would say like they just what would be you know, I guess dealing with this 15 seconds, is that like a max though? So if the person pushes it in 1 second, then can the next person go?
That is that is something I can't give you an answer
Okay.
completely on, because I'm not essentially part there. I just know that that parameter exists, and it was 30 before, and it was played around with. So I'm not sure what is going to be the end thing that is getting pushed. But in theory, once the update is used, you could open the auction again. I think the current assumption is that searchers will need some time to push. And this is also chain specific. Like on stuff like
Right.
Arbitrum, it doesn't need to be, but on mainnet, like you kind of have to at least give them 15 seconds, because that's almost block time.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a cool model in some ways because like I'm sure you know like everyone just wants faster and faster price feeds.
Yeah.
Like and this almost negates your need a little bit for it because it sort of like you're okay if it doesn't update for 10 seconds because you get all the OEV back that would have occurred there anyway. So it's
Yeah, I mean, it is essentially a pull model to what everyone else wants there. I would just say it is a gated pull model where we only allow it for people that pay for it. And a lot of the times people essentially, like when it matters, yeah.
Yeah. So I
There's
mean what
different scenario.
sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I mean what would be like for people thinking about using like just open poll models, like let's say you had the poll model of Coinbase, CoinGecko, Binance, sign prices, you know, the old open Oracle model,
Yeah.
like, and everyone's polling it. What would be the downside to that using that as an Oracle?
There is no downside to it, I would say. It kind of depends where your priorities lie. Like the major downside is that if you allow anyone to update, you kind of forfeit any potential liquidation / OEV value that your DApp generates. Because the moment, essentially, by us gatekeeping and putting an auction on top, we gatekeep also the value that the update has. Whereas when it's completely open, searchers are going to essentially take the competition to the builder / validator, whatever level. Since everybody has access to those updates, it becomes a competition of who can get on chain faster instead of who can get the Oracle update faster, so to speak. It's like it depends what you do, and then the money essentially goes to where it currently goes, to all the validators and block builders and so on, and not to the DApp. Like the DApp essentially forfeits all of the potential quote unquote
Right.
OEV that there is. So it kind of depends. Like if your DApp doesn't have any meaningful OEV, you're free to use an open pull model and allow anyone to update it. But considering if you look at the Flashbots numbers, I think the last one I looked since inception, it's like 800 or 900 million, and roughly 30 or 40% of that is purely liquidations. So there is a bunch of money that dApps with liquidations are simply forfeiting to searchers by allowing anyone to update it, so to speak.
Right.
And that is something that they can take ownership with this. Like that is essentially what we want to achieve here. It's the main reason why we would use something like Flashbot's MEV share to route our transactions through. Like our transactions might have value on chain, so if we route them through these entities that promise to give 90% back to you, we can essentially take advantage of the fact that our transactions create potential MEV. And in the same way, a DApp using an Oracle, if it has any meaningful value and if it has a liquidation mechanism or whatnot, or if it's possible to arbitrage it, just the fact that it's using an Oracle is generating value, Oracle extractable value. And with this, we're just giving them a way to take ownership of that if they want to. They don't need to, but it is potential, like depending on how large your DApp is, it is quite large. And instead of paying for potential oracles, you actually have the chance to get paid for using an oracle.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I guess the one question would be like, are there any thoughts on how you guys are going to decentralize the OEV relayer?
Currently not, but that is a very good question. Yeah. I think it's also a bigger issue. Like our current issue, like our current approach to it is we have the base that is decentralized, and essentially the base service is not ruggable, and is not impacted by OEV share in any way. It's essentially an add-on service that is added on top, and that is centralized currently. And we are currently fine with that. We might think about essentially decentralizing that down the line, maybe, but essentially we're not that far yet. The base assumption here is the worst thing that can happen is that the relay falls off, at which point you consume a regular price feed, which doesn't impact the security of your DApp. Yep. So the only thing that is ruggable is the moneymaker, at which point we also don't make any money. That is essentially our base feed. I just have to repeat this. Our base feed is operated at cost. We make no money with this. So our incentive is to have this relay up and running always, because that 10% that we charge searchers is the only money we're making.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys should have like, my like base idea is like, you should just run your own chain and have all the auctions there, and then like your validators then sign off on who wins the auction, and then everyone can just push this, you know, sign from the validators. You run a bridge, and then it's anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
there's for 5 seconds.
Yeah, there's so many people that I think the thought of running your own chain dropped numerous times in our discussions, but we essentially currently decided against it. Maybe it's something for the future, but I also have the feeling everyone is currently launching their own chain, like including you guys, right?
Yeah. No, it's well, I mean, I think like it was super hard to decentralize this if you know.
Yeah.
It's basically like if you're going to decentralize it, it's, you know, you have to rely either on the, luckily you guys have built in like fallback, so that way like it's centralized, but we're not going to completely break your shit if we fail.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, you know, that's like the next best thing you can do, but it's like, yeah, it's tough.
I mean, one of my core issues with all of this is also that, unfortunately, as time passes, I come to realize that people don't care. So essentially, if we give you the base promise that the base feed is decentralized and then build a centralized service on top that is monetized, the current mood in the crypto space is that is fine. I see way worse setups where the base is not even decentralized and they're monetizing a centralized service, and people don't seem to have an issue with that. So my current, and I'm pretty split on this also, I guess this goes back to what you said in the beginning, like what do you think where the industry goes? I think we're slowly but surely moving away from absolute decentralization, unfortunately, which is, I guess the minimum thing that we have to do. And like, for instance, the fact that this is something that is important to me. If there's going to be centralized aspects, our nodes are first party ran. Our providers are all publishing their Oracle addresses through their DNS record. You can go essentially to any one of our Oracle providers onto their DNS records and check. They actually tell you, this is our Oracle address, just confirm it. Like if something on-chain updates with this address, this is us. We don't have influence to their DNS records. Like these are entities that are telling you, we are running this. And as long as you have verifiability, I guess that, yeah, my focus shifted a bit from absolute decentralization to, I should at least be able to tell what is happening on chain. I shouldn't just rely on the black box that pretends to be, because I've seen too many things go absolutely wrong. Stuff like multi-chain, that, yeah, like I don't want this to turn into a complete shitting on other projects, but there's a lot of pretend decentralization going on with no ability for you to actually verify that, which is weird. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always like, to me it seems like the space has shifted, but nobody like says it out loud. So it's nice to hear it, just because like like now people are like a lot of new oracles. It's like, listen, we've solved how to get like price feeds on really fast and in an accurate way, and you're like, yeah, because you threw decentralization out the window. Like,
Yeah.
of course, like that was never an issue. We knew how to do that. It was like,
Yeah.
it's just a little bit different.
You're unfortunately seeing a lot of this, and like, let's put it like this: I don't have an issue. I don't have particularly an issue with it. What I have an issue with most of the times is that none of this stuff is verifiable.
Right.
Like it is just words that people say. I can't actually go and check. Is it centralized or is it decentralized? It's literally just words, which is pretty bad. Like, because at some point, I'm not saying things are going to break, but when they do, people are pretty big about like crying about this stuff. And I can just repeat the multi-chain stuff. Even people like Andre Cronje were like, yeah, I fucked up. I should have checked that the bridge that claims to be decentralized is actually decentralized. So I think, like I mentioned, I think that the focus shifted. A lot of centralization slowly becomes acceptable as long as you can prove it. But some things are not even provable how they're run. So I think the bare minimum, like I don't expect people to be decentralized anymore, because I don't think 99% of the space is, but I at least expect that I can verify that what you're claiming you're doing is actually what you're doing. And not even that is currently happening.
Agreed. So yeah, I guess we're coming up on an hour here. What's kind of the next steps for API3? Are you guys going to run a bridge? You going to work on some different data? What's next?
I think in the next, like, we are going to concentrate on chain expansion. Now that we have essentially, let's say, an aggregated service live, we want to currently be everywhere while building towards OEV share. Like, OEV share is coming at some point in the next couple of months, but currently we want to spread our base feed everywhere, because as you can imagine from the drawing, OEV share only works when the base is everywhere and available and has all the assets that people want. So that's going to be the core focus in the next couple of months, let's say. And there's already 1,000 ideas being thrown around what else we can do. I think we as an organization now, quite recently actually, I can link you a DAO post. Like I spearheaded a bit. We were doing too much into many different directions. People wanted pull, people wanted this, that, and everyone is doing everything. And I kind of tried to make an argument for us concentrating on something, being good at it, and spreading it everywhere, because everyone is always looking for the next big thing. And I think we currently now finally have something where we can push oracles in a verifiable, transparent, efficient way, deploy really fast on new chains. It takes us a couple of days max, and then offer this gated pull model on top for anyone that wants granularity, or for anyone that wants to take advantage of the OEV that they might be leaking. And I think, like, there's currently so many Oracle projects out there, nobody will be able to do everything perfectly, which is why I think we shouldn't even try to spread out into every direction. I think that is what API3 will be doing for the foreseeable future. Become experts in this, become experts in extracting OEV and returning it to dApps.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you guys have been pretty focused. Like, API3 over the years hasn't changed all that much compared to other projects in the space, I would say.
Yeah,
you
I
haven't
guess.
done a complete pivot, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's still Oracle services. I think, like, the only thing that we now did is we hammered down on this design. That we're not going to explore any pull whatever in the future, any of our own chain in the future. Yeah.
All right. I can't wait for round 3 whenever you're changing your mind on all of this stuff. It'll be
No, I mean, the only way we do that is if OEV share completely doesn't generate any value. But I guess,
yeah. Well,
let's see.
Yeah. Anyway, no, this was awesome. Where can people find out more?
We launched a redesigned website at api3.org that is completely focused on exactly this. So that is your first address. And all the data feeds that we have available are on market.api3.org. Currently on roughly 11 chains. Feel free to browse through, and pretty soon on, very soon on, very much more.
Nice. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This was a blast.
Thanks. Thanks.